Welcome to another exciting episode of bringing Jesus back into focus. He's been put out of focus because the Jewish Christian churches 1700 years ago laid the old Jewish religion over the top of Jesus and the perfect, loving, spiritual creator that Jesus was at one with in the heavenly spiritual world and dimension of spirit. And that's only love and non-violence. And of course they laid Yahweh on top of him and the loving spiritual creator, essentially slandering Jesus and the loving creator. Because as everyone knows who reads the Old Testament, if you want to read it, there are two gods there, not one. The Jewish religion is not monotheistic. They worship a war god, a brutal, murdering, killing, genocidal, thieving war god. Exactly the same god as Mars, the Roman war god. Exactly the same as the Greek war god, Ares, and the Egyptian war god, Sekhmet. They were all exactly the same. They were all brutal, murdering, thieving war gods. The difference being that the Romans also had a god of peace called Pax, and they had a separate temple for that god because it's a different force. It's goodness and love, peace. So they'd go to that temple when they wanted to make friends with their neighbouring countries. And then they go to the temple of Mars and murder an animal, sacrifice, and get the priest to bless them, and off they go to war and kill and steal and murder. That's the Roman Empire. The Greeks did the same. They had Irene was their goddess of sort of love and peace, and they do the same thing. And the Egyptians the same. And the Jews had another god of love and peace also, just like the Romans and the Greeks and the Egyptians. The Egyptians never had actually a sort of a god of love and peace so much as a god who would mellow you out, calm you down, be calm. I can't remember his name, but they had Sekhmet, of course, the violent, brutal war god, the exact same Sekhmet of the Jews, Mars, Ares, Yahweh one. So the war god I called Yahweh one. Then they had another Yahweh called Yahweh two, which was the god of peace and love. In Leviticus we see this other god being talked about by some of the Jews who worshipped. They were trying to guide the Jews into this more loving god, but they didn't want to leave. So that god in Leviticus says, if a foreigner is amongst you, do them no harm. Treat them like a native and love them as yourself. Now that would be today saying, if a Palestinian is amongst you, do them no harm and treat them as a Jew. You see, that's the loving God of the Jewish religion. Then they got the violent, brutal God, and you see that playing out now in the West Bank, where there are Jewish settlers who are literally on YouTube saying Yahweh, their war god, is going to give them back that land. So they're going to murder and steal it from the Palestinians who live there, which is what they are doing. Now, that's the war god. So the Jewish religion then was laid over onto Jesus by these corrupt church leaders around the time of Constantine. But within 80 years after Constantine freed the Christians from persecution, the first thing that collapsed was the pacifist spiritual way of Jesus, and Buddha had the same pacifist way also to the heavenly spiritual world, or nirvana, and they corrupted that so that Roman soldiers could be Christian and go to war and kill. So they became Jewish Christians from then on, because Jews go to war and kill and love one another as well. And Jesus wasn't into that, he left that. So we're going to look at these books that I've had to write, and because I don't like the way they're slandering my good friend and this loving, beautiful, loving spiritual creator, the best description of Yahweh, which is my description, and it is the most accurate, I think, in the world. I don't know if anyone else has spoken about it, but it is the most intelligent, logical, and truthful description of Yahweh in the Jewish religion. Remember, Yahweh has nothing to do with the Christian religion. The best description is Yahweh does have a monotheistic body, one body. It is mono-body, but it has two heads. It's a two-headed God, making the Jewish religion a dualistic religion. It is not monotheistic. Jesus is monotheistic because he's only love and non-violence. He described the loving spiritual life force that was coming from this beautiful heavenly spiritual dimension, and the sort of consciousness of that dimension we call God consciousness. He said, the loving spiritual creator, her love is like the sun that rises on the good and on the evil, like the rain that falls on the just and the unjust. She's kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Unless your love is as perfect as this, you will not enter her world of heaven. That's monotheistic. You can only enter heaven if you are filled with love. You can only be filled with love if you move into your spiritual body, which you've got with you now, because Jesus taught you've got two bodies. And that's the way you get into heaven. You bring your spiritual body alive now, move into it now, before your body of flesh dies, rots and stinks, which is what happens to it. Jesus said with your body of flesh when it's dead, he said, just feed it to the vultures. He said that in the Gospels. That's all you can do with it. There's no life in it. So he tries to bring our spiritual body alive by explaining what the characteristics are of your spiritual body and soul mind of love, which is heavenly. You become at one with them by following his words, which he said his words will save you. They'll help you understand who you really are and remove the false identities out of your mind, your egos and all the rest of it. And then you will enter heavenly spiritual world. You'll transition after the death experience. Through the death experience, you'll transition through it, into it and out of it. These are the two books. I wrote the Gospels of Jesus Unplugged. It's been published around the world now for about a year or something. And it's a better translation of the Gospels, I think, because I removed a lot of the Jewish overlays, and it's the wording I use. For example, instead of God the Father, I say our loving spiritual creator. So it's a much more sort of universal translation of the Greek interlinears. It's still written in a traditional sort of style that people are familiar with who are Jewish Christians. And but I feel it's a much more focused view on his teachings of love and non-violence, and transform yourself now while you've got the chance into a spiritual child. So that's out there in the world. If you want to buy it, or if you want to contact me, I can certainly send you one for the cost of the postage and the wholesale sort of price or whatever. But we'll see how we go. The Teachings of Jesus Unplugged is the book that's going to be published in the next week or two. Around the world available, and that's really describing, it's unplugging Jesus from the Jewish religion. That's what that book's all about. It's about the truth of his teachings, what really happened at the resurrection. The God of the Jews, I explained that's not the same divine source of inspiration that Jesus was empowered by to heal sick children and all the rest of it. It's a different religion. And the Jewish Christian churches should not teach that there's only one God in the Bible, because that's a lie. I left the Jewish Christian Catholic Church when I was 16 because of that lie, 16 or 17. It's clearly not the same God. There's two gods in the Jewish religion. One of them's a God of love, limited love. Okay, that's okay. But this other one's got nothing to do with Jesus. The genocide of Jericho, what's that got to do with Jesus? Killing little children. Sorry. Schizophrenic religion. jcinfocus@gmail.com if you'd like to contact me. This is the daily prayer that I say, and I'll say it for you now. This is how I center myself into my spiritual body, that I'm sitting here, but I've got two bodies. And you have too. We only see our body of flesh because we see mainly through the eyeballs, the body of the flesh. But we've got a spiritual body. You have to awaken that. You have to move into it and become at one with it. But the spiritual mind, or soul mind I call it, is only empowered by the loving life force of that loving spiritual creator in the heavenly spiritual world dimension. It's only love there. So how do you get into heaven? Become only love. This is the prayer that can center you into your spirit. If you sit quietly, try to imagine you've got a spiritual body with you right now if you're listening to this. Physical body, sure, but you've got a spiritual body inside. It's like water in a vase. I use the word she to talk about this divine being or God. You can use he, of course, which is the traditional. The word she is very interesting in the English language because you've got both genders, he and the female she, in the one word. And women give birth to our bodies on earth, so why not think of this divine spiritual being giving me a spiritual body? Why not think of her, she gives me this. And women tend to be generally more loving than the rock ape males, gorillas that we see starting wars in the world. Isn't that true? Most soldiers are males, killing and murdering. Anyway, this is the prayer to center you into your spiritual body and just be at one with it. Just think about you've got it, and it's full of light and love. As I rest upon this earth, the Holy One, she will give birth to who I really am, awakening me from clay and sand, a spiritual child of the divine, with only her love that fills my mind. To every creature I will be kind in every single land, for this is truly who I am. a spiritual child of the loving spiritual creator in the heavenly spiritual world, born out of the earth to bring her love to children in need and help guide them home to heaven, as she has guided me, through the spiritual way and teachings that Jesus gave us to be, just as he, a spiritual child of love on earth. So those words, I try to think of, that's my identity. I am no other identity. I might have a profession, that's different. That's an earthly profession. This is my true identity, and everyone has this same spiritual identity of love inside them. And that's the problem. Not everyone knows about it. That's my logo, Spirit Earth logo, the cross and the dove. Jesus had two bodies in one. That's what that symbol represents, and it represents you and me and our bodies as well. The cross represents our body of flesh, just like Jesus. It'll die, rot and stink. But the dove represents the spiritual body that Jesus flew away in, so to speak, to heaven. And he said, follow me. Come to where I'm going. Now, this chapter 15 in the Teachings Unplugged book is quite a short chapter, very brief, doesn't take long. It's just judge not, condemn not. So I'll get into it. John 12:47, Jesus said, and if anyone hears my words and does not believe, I do not judge or condemn them, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. John 8:2-10, one of the most profound and beautiful dialogues of Jesus can be found concerning the woman caught in adultery. In the morning, Jesus came into the temple and taught, and the scribes and the Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in the act of adultery, and they placed her in the midst of them, and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Moses in the law commanded us that such a woman should be stoned to death. What do you say? They said this to try and trap him and accuse him with blasphemy, so they could stone him to death also, along with the woman. But Jesus just stooped down and wrote words in the dirt in front of them with his finger for them all to see, ignoring them. But they insisted he answered their question. So he stood up and said to them, He who is without sin amongst you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. Then he stooped down again and continued writing words on the ground. When they heard him speak these words and saw what he was writing on the ground, they began to leave one by one, beginning with the older ones first, until they had all left. And Jesus was left alone with the woman in the center of the courtyard. When Jesus stood up and saw the woman alone, he said to her, Woman, where are those who accused you? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Master. Then Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you, but go your way and sin no more. The Jews worshipped a two-headed God and the Yahweh Godhead of war and death, whom they loved to serve any chance they could get, was the source of this violent condemnation and potential murder. The Godhead of love is ignored when they murder and steal. Jesus had a very difficult situation to contend with, but dealt with it on a number of levels through the loving spiritual life force and understanding that empowered his spiritual body and soul mind of love. Firstly, he had to save the woman's life. Then he had to do it without committing blasphemy against the two-headed God of the Jews that they worshipped, to avoid being murdered by them himself for contradicting their two-headed God Yahweh and Moses. If he openly spoke that Moses followed and worshipped a false two-headed God, they would have killed him on the spot. He accomplished this in a very simple, effective and powerful way that the murderers could not easily get out of, by writing down many of the rules and laws of the Jewish religion on the ground for them to see. He knew they were all imperfect in some way, and had undoubtedly broken these laws also. Once they saw these other laws he wrote on the ground, each individual realized they were guilty of transgressing a law also, like this woman. And since they did not want to be stoned to death if anyone found out, it prompted their own conscience to walk away from committing murder, as Moses instructed them to do. This sort of profound wisdom can only arise through being a fully awakened spiritual child of our loving spiritual Creator, as Jesus had become. At the same time as saving his and the woman's life, He was helping them question their own perverted religion to help them see how brutal their Yahweh One Godhead of war and death really is. They were devoid of true spiritual love and life, so he was directing them to find the one true loving spiritual creator who can never hurt any child. And in this instance, he was being a true living example to them of how a spiritual child of our loving spiritual creator in this world behaves. Finally, he pours out his and our loving creator's love over her shame to heal her of this wrongdoing and its consequences, and lovingly advises her to continue on her way in this world towards heaven by not sinning anymore. Unlike the two-headed God of the Jews and its followers, he and our loving spiritual creator cannot murder or kill anyone, for their entire mind and being is empowered only by her loving spiritual life force. They are single in their identity and are not divided within, like the two-headed God of the Jews, and are full of light and love for all her children, and only save them to heaven and never condemn them. Here Jesus gives us all a beautiful example of how to engage with any child who has committed a wrongdoing through seeing them through the eye of love, compassion and forgiveness, instead of hatred and brutal judgment. In Matthew 7:3, Jesus taught, "Why do you point out the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye?" Luke 19, Jesus taught, "For the spiritual child of our loving Creator has come to find and save those who are lost, not kill them." John 3:17, Jesus taught, "The child of our loving spiritual Creator comes to save the world, not to condemn it." In Luke 6:37, Jesus taught, "Judge not, and you'll not be judged. Condemn not, and you'll not be condemned. Forgive, and you'll be forgiven. For with what measure you give out, it will be given back to you. As you reap, you'll sow." That's the karma that Buddha talked about, the karmic laws. Matthew 9:13, Jesus taught, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice." In Matthew 5:7, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." Genuine critical opinions, if given with love to help someone, can be very beneficial for someone. But we often seek to justify and build ourselves up by running someone else down. We use them like a footstool to climb higher up into our ivory tower of arrogance, built from the bricks of our own ego that eventually comes tumbling down. The only foundation to build our home on are the rocks of love, compassion and non-violence. We do not have the omniscient capacity of our loving spiritual creator to know everything about everyone else's life, to be able to condemn or judge anyone. Only our loving creator knows all the circumstances that may have led a child into darkness. And who knows how we would have turned out if we were in that child's place. We can and must only judge the action as being wrong or evil and try to help the child see this so they can change their ways and awaken to their true spiritual identity of love. In Australia, during an election, I delivered my own pamphlets to vote the Liberal government out of office after they denied a ship called Tampa that had saved a boatload of refugees from drowning at sea from putting them safely ashore in Australia. The Liberal leader and government deliberately ran a scare campaign to inflame hatred and racism against the refugees in order to win the election. To my shame, as an Australian, they won the election. But we must still try to bring in love where there is none. One morning around 6 a.m, while delivering my pamphlets into letterboxes, I approached a house that was run down with a wrecked car in the front yard. A small boy around 4 years old with bare feet and dirty clothes suddenly appeared out on the pathway in front of me, but facing away from me. He did not see me coming. He suddenly saw me and shouted an expletive, F something something K. His face was dirty, and I thought to myself, what hope have you got to grow up and lead a normal, well-balanced life filled with love? I felt so sorry for him and wonder how he's turned out. As my mother used to advise us when we saw children down and out, we must always be compassionate towards them, because there but for the grace of God go I. Judge not, do not condemn. You don't know what's led a child into something. Be careful. You could fall down tomorrow. God is love, love is life. Judge not, and you'll not be judged. Condemn not, and you'll not be condemned. Forgive, and you'll be forgiven. For with what measure you give out, it will be given back to you. We all reap what we sow. So give a whole lot of love. And guess what you'll get back when you die, when your spiritual body leaves your body? You will feel a whole lot of love. So that's the Condemn Not, Judge Not chapter, very short, very brief. I'm just bringing out some of the main points of Jesus' teachings. The book of the teachings Unplugged isn't an extensive dialogue on the beautiful teachings of Jesus. It's a very important focus on some of the most main aspects of what he was trying to get across, and removing certainly the Jewish Old Wine Testament poisoning. I've removed that right out of the picture because they're slandering him and they're slandering the loving spiritual creator. No Jewish Christian church in the world should say there's only one God in the Bible. That's a lie. And yet my Catholic church that I was born into was telling that lie to everyone. And all the others do as well. I don't know of any Christian churches. I think Bobby Collier in America, I think he's got a Christian church. He calls out the two-headed God of the Jews as well, like I do. And he's got his own Christian sort of community happening there, or organisation. Good on him. He's much more traditional than I am. I'm a little bit more universal in my view. Buddha and Jesus are my main two go-to spiritual teachers, because when I left the Jewish Christian Catholic Church, I went straight across to the Buddhists. I knew Buddha was a pacifist. You just hear about that growing up. And once I started listening to the monks' lectures about Buddha's teachings, amazingly, what did Buddha teach? Clear the dirt from inside your cup, inside your mind. That's the problem. Exactly the same teaching as Jesus. It's inside your mind has to become clear, light mind. So I was really grateful that they are here in Australia, the Buddhists, because they taught essentially what Jesus taught about the clear light mind experience. Clean your own mind out first before you can help anyone else. But Jesus had another dimension, another level higher than Buddha really. Buddha taught selflessness and equanimity and clear light mind. Treat everyone the same with compassion. Don't hurt anyone. Don't kill anyone. He was a pacifist. Exactly the same teachings as Jesus, until they were destroyed in the 4th century by the corrupt church leaders under the influence of Emperor Constantine. I'm a pacifist. I belong to the original church that Jesus set up, the original community, the original followers. I'm one of his original followers. There's not a lot of us around, but we're still here, popping up occasionally out of the garden soil. The Quakers, of course, the Amish, they're pacifists. They're dedicated pacifists. But they still, I don't think they understand that the Jews have two gods. I think they're still a bit, deluded there, but that's okay. That's main thing is you follow Jesus, even if you mix the new wine in with the old wine. Just stay with Jesus and don't bother studying the Jewish religion, the Old Testament. And I always say, rip the book of Revelations out and burn it, because that's an Old Testament book of Daniel. It should not be in the New Testament. It's an Old Testament Jewish book. Get rid of it. That's the most stinking, filthy slander about Jesus written in the Bible. And yet I've been to churches who teach that all day long. Jesus is coming back in the clouds. He's going to start wars. He's going to put sores on people's bodies. He's going to starve people to death. All the exact opposite things that Jesus did when he was alive. They're lying, this filthy, stinking slander to Jewish Christians who come into their churches telling them that Jesus is going to come back and do that. It stinks. I really got angry when I visited all these different churches. They banged on about this all day long. I just thought, I got to write about this. And Jesus in heaven went, go ahead. And I said, but I'm just a gardener. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a cardinal or a pope or something, or a priest or an elder in some Jewish Christian church, or a university trained theologian. And they said to me, no, but we're love and non-violence. I said, well, that's true. Okay, I'll give it a go. So that's why I've done it. I don't want them slandering him, and I want Jewish Christians I want the entire Jewish Christian churches in the world to change. All of them. This could be a real revolution. We need more children on YouTube and more children in Christian churches to start speaking up about this. You've got to cut ties with the Jewish religion. If you don't understand how evil and stinking filthy their war god Yahweh is, the same as Mars, same as Ares, same as Sekhmet, all filthy stinking war gods, murder and steal land. If you don't know by now, looking at what the Jewish people are doing on the West Bank and what they've done in Gaza, you'll never know. You'll never know. The Jews are showing you they worship two gods on full display. And the really evil thing is that no democracy in the world's stopping them. It's unbelievable. However, everyone reaps what they sow, and if they want to go to hell, they can go there. I strongly recommend they stop murdering and killing and stealing land on the West Bank and in Gaza. They've tried to get Gaza. But anyway, I can only advise them, warn them, you're going to hell. Hamas will be there with you, don't worry. Putin will be there with the Russian army. You won't be alone. You'll all be in hell. Don't go there. Drop your guns if you're in the Jewish army and go home and love your family. And love the Palestinians in your neighbourhood and defend them. Stand up for them. Stand up for their rights. They're the good Jews in Israel, about 5%, maximum 20, probably 5% to 10. They actually really do stand up for the Palestinian children of God. We're all children of God as far as we're all human beings, aren't we? Okay. Well, that's my bit of a rant there. I mean, like so many of us, I'm outraged at what's going on there, just outraged. But all warmongers, all soldiers, they all belong to Satan anyway. So they're all Satan's army, different uniforms. I see them all wearing the same uniform of Satan. Murdering, killing, worshipping Mars, the war god of death. Sekhmet, the war god of death. Ares, the Greek war god of death. Yahweh one, the war god of death. So please, this is a time for revolution in the Jewish Christian churches. We need new Christian churches now to bring children back. Cut your ties with the Jewish religion. Cut the Bible. I always say to everyone, look, there's my Bible. There's two of them. That's the Jewish religion here, the Old Wine Testament. Look how thick it is. That's in Christian churches, the Jewish religion. And look at that. Look at that little thin bit there. That's the Christian religion versus this. No wonder this little one's being poisoned by this big monster. No wonder. And there's in this, I always rip out the book of Revelations and burn it. It's filthy. So there you go. I'll leave you with that. Now, the only way you're going to get into heaven is to move into your spiritual body before your body of flesh dies. That's the only way. Whenever you love, whenever you forgive, whenever you're compassionate, whenever you're generous, whenever you're kind, whenever you help those who've fallen down, you are being spiritual, whether you know it or not. You are strengthening your spiritual identity, your spiritual body, and your soul, mind of love. You're not a dark shadow figure. You're not a false figure. You're truly loving, truly caring, truly compassionate. You don't worship money. You don't be involved in any army in the world. You will never join one, ever. You'll never pick up the gun, ever. You really are spiritual. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Jew, a Christian, a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Sikh, a Baha'i, a Muslim. It doesn't matter about that so much as your characteristics or dispositions or new covenant is what Jesus, that's the way they describe the Greek word. The Greek word, Jesus said you've got a new identity, a new disposition, a new character. That's what he means. That's what the new covenant really means. It's badly translated, as always, in these Jewish Christian Bibles. He's saying you've got a new identity, and that was before he went on the cross. They killed his old identity, his body of flesh. he had it, but that's temporary. Then he appeared to them in his new identity, which we all have within our body. It's a spiritual body and soul, mind of love. That's what the disciples saw when he rose from the dead, his spiritual body. That's why they couldn't easily recognize him. But he looked like him and he sounded like him, but his body was sort of different, Yeah, because it was spiritual. His body of flesh was dead back in the tomb. And, of course, the disciples had to hide it, of course, because they realized what had happened. They couldn't teach the Jews that. They weren't ready for that. Even the disciples took them right to the very end before they understood what he was actually talking about all the time. You've got two bodies. Flesh only gives birth to flesh. Spirit only gives birth to spirit. Marvel not, I tell you, you've got to be born again into your body of flesh. And then you can enter the spiritual world. You've got to have a spiritual body to enter a spiritual world. He says God is spirit. It's a spiritual world. You have a body like an angel. Well, as I used to say to my late sister Joan, who passed away 2.5 years ago, 73 years she had cerebral palsy in a wheelchair, her whole life crippled. Her spirit shone like the sun. She was so strong. But I said to Joan in the last sort of years we were together there, I don't think there's any toilet paper in heaven, Joan. She'd say, no, different bodies. So she's got one there, and I'm still struggling to make sure I'm staying on the path. I'm trying to stay, as good as I can with my spiritual life, because that's the one that's going to leave. And yours will too. Try to be love. Try to bring peace and love into the world. We're going to have to become pacifists, otherwise this is all going down the toilet, I'm afraid, the way we're going at the moment. So let's try and turn it around, just if we can, to whatever degree we can in our own life. There we go. Well, that's it anyway. So love your way to heaven. Be a bridge from heaven to earth. The loving life force flows into your spiritual body, inside your physical body. Then you manifest it through your physical body. That's how it works. But if you block it flowing into your spiritual body, Putin, the Russian army, Netanyahu, the Israeli army, Hamas, even Ukraine, they're blocking it. They're no longer in their spiritual identity. They've shifted into the false shadow identity based only on the flesh that dies, rots and stinks. And they've created these false, egotistical, murdering, killing identities that they're living out of. Once they die, of course, their spiritual body will be so little and tiny and so dim in light and life. They'll be covered in so many layers of stinking, murderous filth that it's going to take a long, long time for them to experience the horror that they've caused to other children, and they will experience it. They don't realise this. They don't know about hell. They have got no idea. Otherwise, they'd be really, wetting their pants now, knowing what they're heading for. But there you go. What can you do? We can only warn them, and I'm warning them right now on YouTube. You're all going to hell if you keep murdering and killing other children with your war games. Evil, stinking, satanic war. So anyway, sorry. I've got to be positive. Be loving in your life, wherever you are. Love your family, love your friends, love your neighbours, people at the workplace. If you see someone down and out, help them. Start bringing love into the world more and more, which you probably already do anyway, to some degree, but even increase it, and never back these warmongers. I don't back the Australian warmongering machine at all. I don't want they're buying these nuclear missile submarine things. A total waste of money, useless. We got homeless people on the street. We need more hospitals. We've got to help the Aboriginal people more. Oh no, let's get some submarines, some nuclear submarines with weapons on them. What a complete stinking waste of taxpayers' money. It's not going to help bring peace in the world. Why don't they have a supply ship filled with trained people who are nurses, doctors, engineers, farmers, whatever, horticulturalists, and send them off to countries with tractors and all sorts of cranes and things to help recover earthquake areas or disasters or tsunami areas. Why not have a fleet, an army of workers of love, all skilled in different things? That's the sort of Navy I'd support. That's the sort of Air Force taking over supplies of food and medical supplies. I support that part, but not the tanks and the bombs and the guns and the missiles and drones. They're all satanic, created by children who are satanic. You've got to understand this. These children are really evil. Really evil. And we can't legitimise it like we're doing it. We've got to condemn them outright. Don't support anyone who does that business. Anyway, like John the Baptist, I'm a voice in the wilderness, but I don't eat locusts. I pray that your spiritual body leaves your physical body and goes straight to the heavenly spiritual world, and if you are only filled with love and don't hurt anyone, you will be there. Bye.